We are undertaking an in-depth exploration today of a truly complex and disturbing case from 2020. We're looking at the murder of Gretchen Anthony in Jupiter, Florida.
And this all unfolded right as the world was, just gripped by the terrifying uncertainty of the early COVID-19 pandemic.
Exactly. And our mission here is very sharply defined by the source material we've gathered. We need to do more than just summarize the facts. We're going to extract the precise timeline, analyze the key players, and most critically, understand how the perpetrator weaponized the chaos.
The immediate chaos, the isolation.
Right. And the public fear of this new global virus to create an elaborate, calculated cover story for his crime will trace the investigation from the moment Gretchen vanished until the final resolution.
And it's essential as we begin this examination of the sources that we acknowledge the profound tragedy here. Our focus is strictly on the facts of the investigation and the mechanisms of the deception, but our deepest sympathy rests with Gretchen Anthony.
She was 51 years old, a devoted mother, a professional. Her life was violently and unjustly taken.
It's a painful example of escalating domestic danger and betrayal committed by her estranged husband, David Anthony. We're using the sources to understand the timeline that law enforcement had to navigate during this moment of, global crisis.
So let's begin with a quick overview of the essential facts, sort of the scaffolding of this entire story. Gretchen Anthony was an established human resources manager in Jupiter, and she was in the painful but necessary process of divorcing her estranged husband, David Anthony.
A fitness trainer with a history of instability.
And David murdered her on March 21st, 2020.
And the reason this case is so relevant to that specific historical moment is the remarkable cold-blooded deception he deployed immediately after.
The fabricated claims.
Right. He claimed Gretchen was infected with COVID-19, that she was critically ill and forcibly quarantined, all while he was methodically fleeing the state to escape justice.
Okay, so let's dedicate some time to truly profiling Gretchen Anthony, establishing the full context of the life that was so violently interrupted. The source material shows she was born Gretchen Stoughton Crane in Doylestown, Pennsylvania in 1969.
Okay.
But she spent her younger years in New Jersey, specifically in West Long Branch and Wanamassa. She was rooted in the Northeast before she made the move down to Florida.
In understanding her background, it gives us some insight into her stability and her professionalism. She was a graduate of Shore Regional High School in 1987. She continued her studies at Wood-to-Bay-Coburn School and then earned her bachelor's degree from Monmouth University.
So you see a very consistent path there.
A very consistent, deliberate life path focused on personal and professional development.
Her career history really underscores that. She dedicated many years to teaching, including a significant period at the Weiss School.
Right.
But by 2020, at the age of 51, she had firmly established herself in Jupiter, Florida, holding a senior role as the human resources manager for a local utility company.
And this wasn't someone who was, transient or rootless. She was established professionally and personally.
That professional foundation is so critical because it meant her sudden absence would be noticed immediately.
By a wide, organized network, right?
Exactly. Her coworkers, her family, her friends. The sources also highlight her personal life. She was a mother to a 12-year-old daughter from a previous relationship.
And that detail just adds immense gravity to the idea of an abrupt, unannounced disappearance. Any attempt to explain her absence needed to account for her complete abandonment of her professional life and, of course, her child.
Most importantly, her child.
Yes.
So now, let's pivot to the profile of the man who committed this crime, David Anthony. He was also known by his original name, David Anthony Deutsch.
He worked as a fitness trainer. The sources indicate their paths crossed at a gym where he was employed. They married in Las Vegas in March of 2015.
And the information you've compiled about David's history, it suggests a pattern of instability that long predates their marriage. And it certainly predates the events of 2020.
It does. Our sources detail a specific and frankly bizarre incident where he served a brief jail stint for holding up a Blockbuster video store.
A Blockbuster?
Yes, and astonishingly, he reportedly used a squirt gun during the commission of that crime.
A squirt gun? That isn't just a troubled past. It suggests really erratic behavior, a distorted view of risk and consequence, even early on.
In that pattern of volatility, it just continued right up to the murder. Professionally, he was highly unstable in the years leading up to 2020. She lost his job in 2017.
Okay.
He was briefly rehired in 2020, only to be fired again shortly after. This job volatility, paired with his prior history, It led to some very clear warnings.
It certainly did. What the sources reveal is that David's manager at his fitness job actually recognized the danger he posed.
Which is a key piece of testimony.
It is. The manager explicitly warned Gretchen to stay away from him. And Gretchen herself, recognizing the threat, reportedly responded by acknowledging the severity of the situation.
She just stated simply that David was crazy.
Right, and that shows her awareness of the danger, even if she couldn't fully escape it in the end.
That brings us to the most direct context for the crime. The imminent, and from Gretchen's perspective, desired separation.
They had separated in late 2019, with David moving out and residing with his mother in November of that year.
And Gretchen was taking decisive legal steps to formalize it. She filed for divorce on February 28, 2020.
This is absolutely key context.
It is. For David, this legal action represented a final, unchangeable loss of control and access. It appears to be the primary catalyst for what happened next.
And on top of that, the sources note that she had the foresight to install security cameras after David returned to her house uninvited.
Which suggests she recognized the escalation.
Yes, the physical threat he posed even before the critical date of March 21st. The cameras, tragically, didn't stop the crime.
No, but they ended up providing the definitive evidence needed for the prosecution.
So we have a timeline where Gretchen is systematically dismantling David's presence in her life. She's using legal and physical security measures.
And David, with a history of erratic behavior and job instability, is facing this total loss of control.
That sense of mounting pressure is crucial when we look at the external factor that then enters the picture, the COVID-19 pandemic.
To truly analyze the cover-up, we have to immerse ourselves in the environment of mid-March 2020. This wasn't just a news event.
Yeah.
It was a societal breakdown of routine and certainty. The World Health Organization declared the COVID-19 virus a global pandemic just over a week before Gretchen's murder.
That timing is profoundly important. You have to think back to those few weeks. Schools were closing, businesses were suddenly shuttered, supply chains were freezing up.
The prevailing atmosphere was one of intense, just amorphous fear.
And David Anthony viewed this global upheaval through a pathological self-serving filter.
Indeed, what the sources document is disturbing. David immediately interpreted the unfolding crisis as an end-of-the-world prophecy.
And that elevated his inherent instability into something far more dangerous. It gave him this massive global canvas to project his personal delusions and paranoia onto.
He saw chaos, and he saw opportunity.
His initial attempt to act on this paranoia was to try and regain control over Gretchen.
He unsuccessfully attempted to convince her to travel with him to Costa Rica.
His rationale was explicit, right? He said they needed to escape the pandemic by fleeing the country.
Right. And when she refused to join him in this delusional flight, that refusal seems to have been the final trigger for the violence.
It moves the narrative from just erratic behavior to criminal premeditation.
Absolutely. He wanted to force her cooperation in his escape fantasy. And when that failed, the ultimate rejection of his plan, he shifted to a plan that involved removing her entirely.
And it's vital we detail the critical legal incident that occurred just days before the murder. It demonstrates his escalating disregard for any rule or authority.
Just 1 week prior, on March 15, 2020, David was reported for a disturbing incident following teenage girls at a mall.
And this specific confrontation led to his arrest.
When police apprehended him, he reacted violently. He was charged with resisting arrest with violence after he slammed a car door on the arm of a responding officer.
That detail-resisting arrest with violence is a huge red flag. It should have stopped him from being on the street.
Yet, he spent just a few days in jail.
He managed to post $3,000 in bail and was released 3 days before Gretchen's murder.
And here's the detail that links directly to his later flight. A specific, non-negotiable term of his release was that he was not allowed to leave the county.
Which means that when he executed the murder on the 21st and then immediately fled Florida, he wasn't just committing a homicide and a cover-up.
No, he was immediately in contempt of a court order.
An order stemming from a violent confrontation with the police that had occurred just 72 hours earlier.
The legal system attempted to contain his volatility, but he completely ignored the constraints placed upon him.
That combination, extreme personal instability, facing an immediate irreversible divorce, a delusional Armageddon mindset, and fresh legal charges, it all created a perfect storm.
The pandemic didn't cause him to be violent, but the fear and confusion it generated absolutely provided the template for the concealment that followed.
Let's transition now to the crime itself, relying on the detailed evidence investigators meticulously gathered.
The source material places the event in the early morning hours of March 21st, 2020, at Gretchen's residence in the Abacoa community of Jupiter, Florida.
We know David entered the home dressed in dark clothing, and the evidence provided by that surveillance system Gretchen installed, it proved devastating.
The footage captured David lurking on her patio.
A chilling demonstration of premeditation. He wasn't just having an unplanned argument, he was waiting and watching before making his move.
And this is where the conversation really needs to slow down, to focus on the harrowing detail provided by the smart home technology.
Yes.
The presence of Amazon Alexa in the home captured muffled audio of Gretchen in her final moments, unsuccessfully attempting to call 911 through the device.
Let's just consider the technical aspect of that for a moment. Recovering that audio, especially in a muffled state, is a massive technical undertaking.
But the fact that it was recorded at all is extraordinary.
It is. It provides a direct, time-stamped digital witness to her desperate final attempt to reach help by yelling for the smart device to call emergency services. It's a terrifying insight into the brutality of that morning.
And that digital testimony was supported by human testimony. A neighbor later reported to police that they had heard a woman screaming from the direction of Gretchen's house.
Specifically shouting, "No, no, it hurts."
The forensic and human evidence, they align perfectly to establish that a violent struggle resulting in her death occurred in those early hours.
The immediate aftermath was also captured by the cameras, detailing David's efforts to, well, dispose of the body and cover his tracks.
The surveillance footage captured him subsequently loading items, and we presume that's Gretchen's body, into her car.
There were critical pieces of physical evidence captured, too.
Yes. The footage showed a water jug that was smeared with blood, which must have been used during the crime or a rapid cleanup attempt.
That is forensic gold, a seemingly small detail that ties him irrefutably to the violent act itself.
The footage also showed David reaching up to disable one of the security cameras.
A conscious, immediate attempt to destroy the evidence he knew was accumulating.
Exactly.
The next crucial step in his early concealment plan was the staging of the vehicle. Gretchen's car, which contained her purse, was found abandoned in the parking lot of the Jupiter Medical Center in Florida.
Why a medical center? This isn't random.
No.
This detail seems to be the first sort of crude attempt at laying the groundwork for the illness narrative he was about to deploy.
By placing the car there, he suggested an urgent hospitalization or some kind of medical need. It implies he was already calculating a way to explain her absence.
But investigators were quick to check that assumption. They confirmed that Gretchen had not been a patient at that facility since 2008.
So that immediately invalidated the implicit connection he was trying to establish. It shows that while his plan was elaborate, it also had obvious flaws right out of the gate.
And forensic analysis on the vehicle confirmed he was the last person to drive it immediately after the murder. The vehicle tested positive for blood on the steering wheel and the gear shift.
So the digital and physical evidence, the camera footage, the Alexa audio, the neighbor's testimony, and the blood in the car allowed the police to establish unequivocally that a murder had occurred.
Even before the body was located.
Exactly. The investigation really commenced immediately once Gretchen's established routine was broken.
Family became aware of her disappearance when she missed lunch with a friend on Saturday, March 21st.
And then failed to report to work on Monday, March 23rd. The sudden, complete cessation of communication and professional duties was the first indicator that something was terribly wrong.
When law enforcement searched the home, the physical evidence contradicted any theory of a voluntary departure. They found clear signs of a violent struggle.
A broken picture frame, shards of glass scattered on Gretchen's bed, and a stained towel. These items spoke volumes, confirming the violence that the neighbor and the Alexa audio had hinted at.
What also became apparent were the meticulous, though ultimately flawed, cleanup efforts.
Investigators noted bleach stains on the garage floor, a chilling detail, as David later confessed to committing the fatal stabbing right there.
They also found bottles of cleaning agents staged in the kitchen. This confirmed a conscious attempt to sanitize the scene and hide the crime.
Which pointed directly to attempted concealment by a person who had access to the home.
And this is where the core, unique aspect of the case really takes center stage. The calculated manipulation of the pandemic narrative.
Starting on March 23rd, the day her work noticed her absence, Gretchen's family began receiving text messages, supposedly authored by her.
And these texts contained a specific, timely, and in that chaotic moment, a highly plausible lie.
The texts claimed she would be self-quarantining for 2 weeks.
And if you think about the psychological efficacy of that message in March 2020, everyone was being told to isolate. Isolation was expected.
It was often enforced. A 2-week quarantine message was almost perfectly designed to stop any friends or family from attempting a physical welfare check.
And this narrative was deliberately reinforced. On March 24th, our coworkers received an email that contained the exact same information.
It was a coordinated digital effort to silence her network for 14 days.
It provided David with a critical head start. It was a classic example of criminal opportunism, using the biggest public health crisis in a century as a private shield.
But when law enforcement finally contacted David directly, the deception shifted from plausible to, well, preposterous.
He doubled down on the lie, but he made it so elaborate that it instantly raised suspicion.
He claimed Gretchen had become infected with COVID-19 and was receiving specialized intensive treatment at a Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, a CDC facility in Belle Glade, Florida.
And this detail became a rapid point of failure for his entire story.
Why did it fail so quickly?
Because police could immediately confirm that no such CDC treatment facility existed in Belle Glade or anywhere nearby.
His attempt to lend institutional authority, the CDC, to his fantastical story was his undoing.
It suggested either extreme arrogance or just profound desperation, believing that in the rush and confusion of the pandemic, no one would bother to check the legitimacy of a specific public health facility.
And while David was deploying these digital lies, he was actively executing his escape. On March 24th, the same day, the email was sent to Gretchen's coworkers.
His mother reported to police that he had packed up his truck and, violating his recent bail conditions, had left Florida.
He told her he was heading to Costa Rica with his dog.
But his flight was not entirely smooth or discreet. The sources detail how, as he traveled west, he made specific stops at jewelry stores to sell Gretchen's jewelry for cash.
And what's chilling is the continuing performance of his cover story, even in these brief transactional moments.
He told at least one store owner that the jewelry had belonged to someone who had died from COVID-19.
This demonstrates he was fully committed to the pandemic as his narrative device. He wasn't just trying to deceive the police.
No, he was creating a consistent, though utterly false, public story that Gretchen was dead due to the virus, not his actions.
It is remarkable how rapidly the electronic evidence and his own behavior just piled up against his fabricated story.
David might have thought he had successfully utilized the confusion of the pandemic to gain a substantial head start.
But the constant electronic trail left by both his and Gretchen's cell phones provided investigators with an unassailable map of his movements.
And that completely contradicted his claims that Gretchen was either alive or that she had died naturally.
The cell phone data was the investigators' most effective tool. Let's just look at the trail.
Gretchen's cell phone, which David clearly kept with him after sending the fake quarantine texts, pinged in Pensacola, Florida, shortly after noon on March 25th.
A ping in this context means the phone connected to a specific cell tower at that precise time. It gave law enforcement an accurate location and established the direction of travel out of Florida.
And that initial ping was quickly followed by subsequent pings further west in Texas.
This established the vector of his flight, tracking the movement of Gretchen's phone across state lines.
Then they had David's own electronic trail, which shadowed the exact same route, confirming he was the one carrying her device.
His phone pinged in Pecos, Texas on March 27th.
And the following day, March 28th, it pinged in Las Cruces, New Mexico. These consistent data points, placed chronologically along the I-10 corridor, narrowed the search area dramatically.
And this is the power of digital evidence. It doesn't lie, and it creates a chronological account of movement that no verbal claim can easily undo.
The relentless tracking led directly to his apprehension. David Anthony was finally apprehended in Las Cruces, New Mexico, on the evening of March 31st, 2020.
The end of his elaborate flight was strangely, anticlimactic. He was found at a gas station while simply walking his husky dog.
His flight had ended. The manhunt was over.
Upon his arrest, he was immediately charged with second-degree murder and kidnapping in connection with Gretchen's disappearance.
And he was held without bail at a detention center in Las Cruces.
Authorities were convinced, based on his movements and his earlier stated intent, that he was not just stopping in New Mexico.
No, they believed he was actively positioning himself to relocate to South America. It confirms his earlier fixation on escaping to Costa Rica to avoid the perceived Armageddon.
His entire journey was an attempt to get beyond the reach of U.S. jurisdiction.
And despite the overwhelming electronic and physical evidence, David initially clung to a truly bizarre and defiant false narrative of innocence.
He insisted that Gretchen was still alive and well.
His story was complex and shifting. He claimed she was on the run because she had supposedly discovered illegal activities at her utility company and feared someone was after her.
Forcing her disappearance.
Right. He even claimed they had traveled together to El Paso, Texas, and only separated there.
This attempt to paint Gretchen as the fugitive, running from her own dark secrets, it completely collapsed under the weight of the phone pings, the blood evidence in her car, and the staged quarantine messages.
His extradition back to Jupiter, Florida on May 14th formally ended his attempt to escape.
And it set the stage for the final, necessary phase of the legal process and the eventual truth about Gretchen's location.
The immense uncertainty and pain for Gretchen's family persisted for months, given that David was arrested so far away and was still lying about her status.
The path to resolution was paved by the legal system, which sought to recover Gretchen's remains for the dignity of her family. And this path began with a negotiated plea deal.
The sources are clear that David Anthony admitted to the crime as part of that plea agreement.
The primary condition of the deal, the thing that gave the family closure, was that he had to disclose the precise location of Gretchen's body.
This admission finally filled in the physical blanks left by the surveillance footage. He confessed to a brutal, violent end.
He stabbed Gretchen to death in her garage, the same garage where investigators found bleached stones, and subsequently discarded her body.
This admission clarified that the struggle was short, brutal, and fatal, matching the initial findings.
The search concluded successfully on December 21st, 2020, 9 months after she was murdered.
Gretchen's remains were discovered about 3 miles from her home, in a stark and depressing location. A grassy area situated behind a Walmart and adjacent to a retirement home.
The medical examination confirmed the cause of death, noting that she had been stabbed multiple times in her neck and torso.
And the location of the discovery is, well, it's emotionally resonant. It was not hidden deep in some wilderness. It was discarded close to the mundanity of everyday life.
A chilling juxtaposition between the violence of the act and the everyday environment where it was concealed.
And the sentencing hearing, which occurred after the body was recovered and the truth admitted, provided one final disturbing glimpse into David's attempt to mitigate his guilt.
During the hearing, David Anthony made a highly contentious claim.
He argued that the widespread fear and uncertainty of the COVID-19 pandemic had essentially predisposed him to commit the crime.
He claimed he genuinely thought the outbreak was an Armageddon and that he needed to flee, suggesting the global crisis triggered his homicidal actions.
While the sources document this claim, they also provide necessary context. Family members reported that David had been suffering from bipolar disorder for years.
So there was pre-existing mental instability that was likely amplified by the pandemic's arrival.
But the court had to balance that context against the clear evidence of premeditation, the complex cover-up, and the deliberate flight across state lines.
His actions showed calculated steps to hide the crime, not just impulsive delusion.
Ultimately, the evidence of intentional deception and violence prevailed.
Per the conditions of his plea agreement for second-degree murder and kidnapping, David Anthony was sentenced to 38 years in prison on January 14, 2021.
He is currently scheduled to be released in 2058, at which point he will be 81 years old. This concluded the legal proceedings related to the tragic murder of Gretchen Anthony.
This detailed analysis of the source material highlights some critical lessons about criminal behavior and opportunity during times of societal upheaval. What stands out is the horrific speed of the crime, the immediate sloppy cleanup efforts, and David's absolute reliance on the COVID-19 pandemic to manufacture a seemingly plausible but entirely false explanation for a disappearance.
This case is a profound lesson in criminal opportunism. David Anthony recognized that the universal expectation of isolation and quarantine in March 2020 was a perfect operational environment for his crime.
His calculated use of fake texts and emails claiming quarantine, it bought him critical time.
It did, because people were conditioned to accept an abrupt, isolated cutoff of communication. The lie was effective precisely because it slotted perfectly into the public paranoia of the moment.
So if you, the person reviewing this material, are looking for the central insight, what's the connection? What should we take away from this factual examination?
The insight is the importance of scrutiny, even during periods of widespread panic. The knowledge gained from this factual examination underscores the need to recognize highly unusual or specific behaviors, such as the bizarre claim of hospitalization at a non-existent CDC facility, even when society is functioning under extreme stress.
The pandemic was a time when total isolation was common, but this tragic story proves the vital importance of questioning narratives that seem to perfectly explain an abrupt total disappearance.
The truth, in this case, was spoken not just by the concession, but by the irrefutable digital evidence that ultimately demonstrated the limits of using a public health emergency as a private shield for malicious, premeditated acts.
A necessary and painful exploration of these sources. Thank you for taking the time to review these details with us.
Thanks for listening.